One of the things that I want to make clear at first is that when I talk about AI today, I'm talking about things like algorithmic systems, machine learning, systemic institutionalized solutions, support systems, and not so much talking about things that we think of as quote unquote strong AI or artificial general intelligence, what I like to think of as autonomous generative intelligences. That being said, everything that I'm going to say is exponentially more important in the considerations of strong AI, even over and above what its importance is for the considerations within algorithmic systems. All that being said, before we talk about why it is that we need disabled and marginalized perspectives in AI research, we have to talk about what perspectives are currently embedded in AI research. And when we take a look at the raft of AI research today, we find that there are a whole host of things that get included and assumed to be true. And those assumptions, those values embodied by those assumptions, get embedded within the research that gets done and within the AI products that get put out into the world and with which we all must live. Those perspectives can be capitalist, thinking about profit motive, thinking about the bottom line, as in the case of certain AI healthcare systems or insurance systems, which will put, in many cases, and have put the bottom line of the insurance company as more important than the life or health of a patient, because that's what it's been trained to do. It's been trained to make sure that the premiums and payouts of the insurance company are as low as possible, regardless of what that takes. But we can also see that in the cases of things like the temporary assistance for needy families benefits and the algorithms that run those systems, as showcased in the works of Virginia Eubanks' Automating Inequality, in which cases people who are already at the lower socioeconomic status are made more subject to systems that will keep them in poverty rather than being able to be elevated out of poverty because of kinds of assumptions about their life and what kinds of needs they have and the payouts of the systems that they depend on get embedded in these systems. We find disableist perspectives embedded in these systems, systems about disability payouts, or even systems about machine vision that tries to monitor how people cross the street, automated vehicles that don't see people in wheelchairs or people using crutches as pedestrians, and so doesn't categorize those people for safety in the same way as it would someone walking on upright on two legs, right? But then there's disability benefit systems which make decisions and determinations about that kind of help and healthcare that people need to live. These systems are often opaque and they're trained on data sets which are in many cases filled with assumptions about what the right kind of way to live is, about what the right kind of healthcare is. So assumptions that in many cases hark back to the 1800s, and assumptions about institutionalization of disabled people. These things persist today and are in many cases black boxed because disabled people have not been consulted in the administration of these things, let alone in their construction. You can see this in the work of people like Karen Howe, asking, can we ever make an AI that isn't ableist? You can see this in the work of Alexander Reeve Givens with the Future Tense article, whose headline you can see here, How Algorithmic Bias Hurts People with Disabilities, and Lydia X. E. Brown and their work at the Center for Democracy and Technology, which looks at benefits determinations, algorithmic systems, benefits determinations for disabled individuals. This report just came out last year. It's really quite in-depth and fantastic. We find that racist bias and racial perspectives are embedded in AI and algorithmic systems all the time. Facial recognition systems famously don't see black people anywhere near as well as white people, people with darker skin tones. In many cases, simple facial recognition systems like blink detection systems on Nikon cameras will ask whether people of Asian descent have blinked when they're usually smiling. These kinds of things are, old biases that get embedded into new systems because the new systems are encoded on the old assumptions that animate the technologies on which the new systems are based. Photographic technology was never really designed to see black people very well. And so when digital technology kind of updated it, it took the same principles and just mapped them onto a digital space. Facial recognition systems that are meant to categorize individuals who are breaking the law are often trained on mugshots. And mugshot databases are notoriously overpopulated with black and brown individuals because black and brown individuals are assumed to be criminal. And so those individuals populate mugshot databases more often. And so those systems have more of those faces in them. And so you get cases where like 28 members of Congress, the top left picture, 28 members of Congress were falsely matched to mugshot databases. You can see this in multiple different work from the ACLU, from ProPublica, a number of different places. The GIF on the top right is from the HP face tracking camera scandal from 2009, wherein it was shown that HP's face tracking camera did not track the faces of black people. In that GIF, a black man, a computer store employee, is saying, "I'm black. I think my blackness is interfering with the computer's ability to follow me." And at the bottom, you have a 2x3 grid, six grid of white women in various clothes, lighter skinned women in various clothes. This is the model of what's known as the Shirley card, and this comes from Kodak, right? This is the Shirley card was a white woman named Shirley, and if you could see Shirley's face, regardless of what she was wearing or what background she was standing in front of, the image was properly balanced. This is the industry standard on which photography was based and continued to be modeled even into the development of digital camera technologies. The same goes for carceral surveillance, carceral systems of justice, which use surveillance systems, facial recognition systems, predictive policing, which says certain groups of people are more likely to be criminal. You place those cameras there, you do your predictive modeling based on your criminal metrics, based on the data that it's trained on. When the data is notoriously filled with overpopulations of Black and brown individuals, minority communities, those systems will be trained to think of those communities as criminal first and foremost. If you then deploy those systems, they will make the same kind of racialized judgments as previously were made by human beings. You can see this in the work of Claire Garvey and others at Georgetown that worked the Perpetual Lineup from 2016, and the deployment of facial recognition and surveillance systems in various communities of color throughout the United States and England. Institutional bias is a perspective that gets encoded not just in the surveillance state, but in the judgments made about people who are then made subject to justice systems in the West, wherein algorithmic bail setting and sentencing recommendation systems will make recommendations that say that a Black man with no priors and lower likelihood of recidivism, based on the system itself's own judgments, based on its own estimations, a Black man with no priors, lower likelihood of recidivism, is recommended a lower likelihood of bail and a higher, more harsh sentence than a white man with priors and a higher likelihood of recidivism. ProPublica's investigation of this in 2016 showed how this system was at play in Broward County. This is the Compass bail setting and sentencing recommendation guidelines. And this, again, is based on what it's trained on. The behavior of human beings trains these algorithmic AI systems, and the systems then replicate and iterate on that behavior, exacerbating these outcomes. And then you have all of the above. On this page, you have a host of different headlines. It's our fault that AI thinks that white names are more quote-unquote pleasant than Black names. Next headline reads, healthcare algorithm offered less care to Black patients. The next one reads, Amazon scrapped secret AI recruiting tool that showed bias against women. In the lower right corner, you've got a GIF of a graph that modeling the word-to-vec software where certain correlations are made along gendered lines between words like king and man, queen and woman. Within the same study, from Kaliskin et al. In 2017, you'll see that there's correlations made between CEO and man, secretary and woman, doctor and man, nurse and woman, president and man, that kind of thing. This gendered bias gets encoded in word-to-vec systems, but it has also persisted in GPT-3 systems in kind of even more nuanced and systemic way, where whole hosts of disciplines that GPT-3 gets trained on to kind of mimic those writing styles, it will cast whole disciplines as meaningless or inadequate or frivolous, as it did with philosophy when it was tasked to write a philosophy paper. Things on the horizon include the Neuralink AI system, the Amazon Halo benefits determination systems are going to increase the proliferation, including things like COVID determinations, who gets what shots when, who gets what treatments in what scenarios, those kinds of things. Neuralink AI is the brain chip interface from Elon Musk and co. Amazon Halo it's meant to be a kind of full suite biometric reader where it tells your heart rate, tells your perspiration, tells your blood ox level, tells you how much water you need. But it also is meant to do things like tell you what your tone is in conversations and whether you might want to modulate your tone. Now, one of the things that's always been true in the United States is that things like a Black woman's tone are often up to scrutiny. Right? Black people are more harshly judged on the whole as to their comportment in social situations, and Black women's tones in particular are often policed for how they interact with each other and comport themselves in conversation, often told that they're being overly agitated or angry. Now, the Amazon Halo is trained on general human interactions, or what its programmers and designers think of as quote-unquote general human interaction. The host of assumptions about what kind of tone is the right kind of tone to strike in conversation is inherently cultural. And if the culture of the people who design and program this tool don't take into account the kind of inherent biases that there are towards certain types of comportment, expression, lived experience, and behavior, those things will then replicate in terms of the Amazon Halo suggesting to Black people that, hey, maybe you want to calm down when they're just having normal conversation. Instantiating the microaggression of the quote-unquote angry Black man or angry Black woman into a systemic culture-wide device that everyone has, monitoring their speech at all times. So what does all of this mean? This is a meme that I made. It's Zoidberg from the show Futurama, and it's sitting in a opera house in a tuxedo, and he's yelling, your AI and algorithmic facial recognition applications are bad, and you should feel bad. All of these tools replicate and instantiate the lived experiences and the perspectives and the assumptions of the people who program them. They instantiate and iterate upon the assumptions and the values of the people who have commissioned them, who have programmed them, who have trained them, and all of the interactions that these systems have when they're out in the world form components of the data on which it learns how to be and how to do what it is meant to do in the world. So what this means is that what we have to do here is ensure that there is no work done in these realms without the perspectives of marginalized individuals being not just tokenistically included, not just polled and mined for perspectives or opinions about the way that these systems come to be, but actively engaged and put at the forefront of the conversations we have and the development we do around AI and algorithmic systems. This isn't the first time we've had these kinds of conversations. These conversations have been at play throughout the history of technology and science. And we can see it in the lives and lived experiences and the contributions of many different people. This page is a graph of 7 different pictures. We have at the top left an image of Dr. Ruha Benjamin, whose work on algorithmic justice and the nature of carceral surveillance and certain types of abolitionist perspectives regarding AI and facial recognition systems has said that ultimately certain things maybe just shouldn't be developed because there's no just way to develop them in the world. The work that is just kind of fundamental to this idea that some things are just impossible to do in a way that is without real, lasting, meaningful harm. Next, we have Wendy Carlos, the trans woman whose work is at the forefront of all electronic music, who was instrumental in developing the tools to translate music into an electronic format. Next, going to the right, we have Dr. Ashley Shu, whose work on technology and disability, on the lives of disabled people and how they interface with their technologies on a day-to-day basis, is doing real kind of long-lasting investigations into what is available to the disabled community versus what the disabled community and members of the disabled community individually say that they need from technologies, that they need to live their lives. Below Dr. Shu's image, we have the image of Dr. Alondra Nelson, who is now the social science coordinator for the Office of Science and Technology Research for the White House under Joe Biden's administration. Her work is just crucial in thinking about the ways that social implications of science and technology need to be interrogated and understood, thought about at the outset rather than as an after the fact kind of post hoc consideration. Next, going to the left, we have Dr. Anna Lauren Hoffman. Anna Lauren Hoffman's work focuses on the ways that technology and gender collide, and specifically one of the things that Dr. Hoffman has talked about is this notion of data violence and the ways that perspectives on trans lived experience, transgender individuals' experience with technology in the world is kind of predicated upon other people's assumptions about what a transgender lived experience ought to be. You see this in everything from just day-to-day life to things like TSA body scanners and the kinds of assumptions that get made by the human individuals that work there, but also the algorithmic systems that work there. And then next to Dr. Hoffman, we have Katherine Johnson, whose work on the Apollo project got human beings to the moon, who was famously almost completely excluded from being able to work in that space because of her race. And in the center of all of this, we have 7 members of the team who are known as the Gallaudet 11. This is a team of individuals who were brought in by NASA to test the effects of weightlessness and disorientation on individuals who didn't have inner ear concerns. For those of you who don't know, Gallaudet University is a deaf university in Washington, D.C., and all of the students there are deaf or hard of hearing. So the Gallaudet 11 were 11 deaf and hard of hearing men whose experiences with the inner ear were drastically different than individuals who hear quote unquote normally. And as a result, they were, according to NASA, prime subjects for being able to, test these notions. Ask the question about what kind of life in space, in weightlessness, what kind of disorientation might human beings suffer? There has never been a deaf astronaut. Deaf people have been used to train astronauts. Data from deaf individuals has been used to train astronauts. There has never been a deaf astronaut. At the very end of all of this question of why AI research needs disabled and marginalized perspectives comes down to this notion of whose perspectives, whose lived experiences animate the technology that we make and to which we are all made subject. As AI research increases its reach and its depth and its breadth and its power, we need to be ensuring that the perspectives, the values that get encoded into these systems are values and perspectives that will not just, again, post hoc accommodate or repair or seek to include in a tokenistic manner the experiences of marginalized individuals, but take those perspectives into account at the outset because those perspectives have something to teach us that is otherwise inaccessible to us. We have to ensure that the perspectives and lived experiences of marginalized people are heeded in this conversation about the design and implementation of algorithmic applications, even and perhaps especially when those perspectives make us uncomfortable. The perspectives and lived experiential knowledge of women, disabled people, trans and gender nonconforming individuals, Black people, Indigenous people, other marginalized identities are in large part informed by being made subject to the worst excesses of technology, up to and including AI. Putting them at the forefront of our conversations about AI may require us to radically rethink our founding assumptions about what AI and automation are for. But for millions of people, doing this will very literally mean the difference between life and death. I have here a whole host of resources, papers, videos, articles. I highly recommend taking them, spending some time with them, and thinking about the ways that we animate our conversations about this. Who is in the room when we make these decisions? Who is driving these questions that we ask, and who is shaping the answers that we give, not just at the end of the day, but at the very beginning of the day? Thank you very much.